wrote down some quotes about what some of the better-known economics textbooks say about about the creation of the Fed and the role of the Fed in the money supply. And to add a little history here, the biggest selling economics textbook in the world by far from 1948 until about the 1980s was the one by Paul Samuelson's Economics. And then around that time, Samuelson took on a co-author named William Nordhaus. And it continued for many years to be published as Samuelson and Nordhaus. And all during this time, even the competing textbooks were just clones of Samuelson's book for the most part. There were a few outliers, there were a few differences, but for the most part, the big sellers that were used to teach hundreds of thousands of college students every year were either the point of view of Paul Samuelson or people who were sort of Paul Samuelson wannabes. And here's one statement from the 16th edition, 1998, that I dug, happened to be in my university library. And this is what college students have always been taught. The Federal Reserve's central goal is low and stable inflation. Hold your laughter, please. It also seeks to promote steady growth in national output, low unemployment, and orderly financial markets. If aggregate demand is excessive and prices are bid up, the Federal Reserve Board may reduce the growth of the money supply. That puts the brakes on the economy and reduces price pressures. That's the economists, mainstream economists are always making these metaphors. The economy is like an automobile. We hit the gas and we hit the brakes and we steer the economy. And that's how they view the economy. If the economy is sluggish and business languishing, the Fed may consider increasing the money supply. That will usually give a boost to aggregate demand and bring down unemployment. How's it working today? They've been boosting a lot, haven't they? Then another quote from Samuelson and Nordhaus, they say, above all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and the independent is in big black print. The Fed listens politely, but generally chooses the path it thinks best for the country. And so there's sort of like godlike people up there who have no personal interests at all. They listen politely to what the politicians say. Even the politician named the president, who gets to reappoint the chairman of the Fed, but they'll tell him to get lost if they think he's saying something that they don't approve of. That's what Samuelson and Nordhaus are saying. Then one final statement from Samuelson and Nordhaus. The Fed is ultimately concerned with preserving the integrity of our financial institutions and combating inflation. This is an example of how the Fed preserves the integrity of our financial institutions. This was a publication that the Boston Fed printed up and sent out en masse to mortgage lenders, not necessarily even the ones that were members of the Federal Reserve System, just mortgage lenders, everywhere. And it's called "Closing the Gap: A Guide to Equal Opportunity Lending, Mortgage Lending." You see, there's a gap between in lending for houses between people who can afford a mortgage and people who cannot afford a mortgage. And we need to close that gap, the Boston Fed is saying. That's what, it's online. Go online and just Boston Fed closing the gap. You'll find this thing. And the Fed says to all these mortgage lenders, they say these are just suggestions. But then they say, failure to comply with the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, or Regulation B, can subject a financial institution to civil liability for actual and punitive damages in individual or class actions. So they say, we're only suggesting this, but it's sort of a gun under the table suggestion, isn't it? They threaten massive class action lawsuits if you don't comply. And so what did Closing the Gap recommend? What are the recommendations? Well, the recommendation number one is ignore traditional measures of creditworthiness when it comes to minority and low-income consumers. So, that's where the no-doc loans came from. Don't even give us a pay stub. Two, traditional ratios of mortgage payments to monthly income can also be ignored. Don't worry about it. We need to close the gap. Three, lack of credit history should not be a factor either. Successful participation in credit counseling is an adequate substitute. So if you have bad credit, you go to a Fed-appointed counselor, and that is supposed to be a substitute for a good credit rating, according to the Fed. The fourth word of advice that the Fed gave to mortgage lenders was this: if a subprime borrower has a property appraisal problem, then the Fed or Fannie Mae could help to find another experienced appraiser. So I bought and sold quite a few houses in my time, and if I got an appraiser and I didn't like the number he came up with and found another one, I'm pretty sure I could get in pretty big trouble, maybe even go to jail for something like that, at least be fined. But here's the Fed telling, we'll send you an appraiser to give the right number for the appraisal so that you can get the loan. And this was in the past 10 years, 10 or 12 years that this was going on. So this was all part of the Fed's policy of what Samuelson and Nordhaus say is preserving the integrity of our financial institutions. Of course, I don't think they did any such thing.